Hi, I'm Brad Haddon. Tonight, Crash speaks to a skipper who masterminded an Australian Ashes downfall. A likeable lad, he played 82 tests for England, made 18 centuries and averaged a tick over 41. He is a former England skipper, he is Michael Paul Vaughan, and he is a cricket legend.
Welcome to Cricket Legends, Michael.
Great to be here, Crash.
We've looked forward to having you on because as an English cricket captain, you're always a bit unconventional. You're a real attacker. You never took yourself overly seriously. Where did that all come from?
Well, I think you can attack when you have a bowling attack that I managed over the course of a few years when you've got Flintoff, Harmison, Hoggard, Jones. You know, you've got a chance to attack. So that's first and foremost, I guess, my style of captaincy came from. You've got to have a bowling attack to be able to do that. I never took cricket too serious. You know, the times that I took it too serious was towards the end of my career. You know, I was desperate to carry on playing. I had a dodgy knee, and I just couldn't perform because I was just taking it too serious. So when I was at my best, I just played the game, watched the ball, didn't kind of over-analyse. And I always feel that, you know, when you're under the stage of playing in front of a lot of people, whether there's 30,000 in the crowd, 60,000, millions watching on the television, I would always say to the players, you've just got to try and believe that you're a rock star. You've got to believe that you're the lead singer, and you've got to try and put on a show, and that's when you're going to perform at your best. You've got to try and play like you used to do as a kid. You know, when you're 10, 12 and you'd cry when it rained. You know, I wanted to try and take that mentality onto the international field.
And of course, then you got to play Test cricket, but your first Test, talk about drama. Coming to the wicket at 2 for none, and then England being 4 for 2 before you'd faced a ball, you at the other end, and Alan Donald and Sean Pollock bowling. That must have been dramatic.
Yeah, it was. It was a gloomy day at the bull ring, the Wanderers, and I always remember Nasser giving me my cap, and he said, look, just make sure you study the senior pros. You know, take a little bit of time to watch the Athertons. You know, Mark Butcher was in the side, Alex Stewart. Just sit back and just watch the way that they prepare, the way that they just give themselves a bit of time. They analyse the opposition. They might look at the computers to see what the angles are going to be facing, and just watch, particularly Atherton. You know, you're a similar kind of player. Just watch Atherton. Well, I was in the first over. Didn't get a huge amount of time to see them. Stood at the non-strikers, then 2 for 2 before I faced the ball. It's 2 for 4. Chris Adams came out on his debut. Asked me what was happening. I said, well, I haven't faced the ball yet, mate. We got hammered in 3 days. Hammered in 3 days. We lost the series 2-1. I think the last game was the only game that we won. And years later, we found out it was a fixed game by Hansi Cronje. I got man of the match in that game, so that was a tour and a half.
Did you sense it at the time?
No, it was a weird week. It was a game at Centurion, and South Africa batted, but it was 2 days of rain. And then we got to I think it was the fourth day, and again the rain came, and South Africa had got something like 210 on the board. And there was a lot of English folk there. There was a big following, probably 4,000 or 5,000. And got to the last day, the sun started to shine. There was still the odd damp spot. And then, you know, Hansi and Nasser Hussain started talking, and it just felt the right thing to do at the time. You know, the series had been lost.
To declare it none for none.
No, they went out. I had to throw a few up. I didn't really have to throw. I just had to bowl normally, and they hit it through to the boundary. And a game was set up. I think we had to chase 270. I went in at number 4. I mean, now looking back, yeah, I kind of understood that the tactics were to make sure that we kept scoring. There was no way that a draw could happen, and that was the actual fix of the game was there had to be a result either way.
I know you were a vigilant sort of captain. Did you ever play in or observed many games you thought, that concerns me?
I have, yeah. You know, you don't want to pinpoint any series, but you know, I certainly was involved in series where I felt something sniffy may have gone on.
And you reported them, is that correct?
Yeah.
To the ICC?
Yeah, and also, you know, when you see things in the game that you've got to understand, pressurised sport, players will make mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, things happen, but you know, there's been cases over the years during commentary that I've seen things, as many of us do. You know, passionate ex-players or
what's
players.
What's an example of, obviously you can't name names, we'll get sued, but what's an example of something you saw that you think, I don't like that, that's suspicious to me?
Well, you just see things within games, particularly T20 cricket. You know, I think that's becoming or I guess the most widespread talked about in terms of fixing. And you do see things in competitions around the world that just doesn't look right, run-outs, certain bowlers bowling at times, but very, very difficult to prove. I mean, there's been all sorts of whispers, rumours, and I don't like whispers and rumours either. You know, I don't like that because they travel and a lot of the time they're not true, but you know, I still have my suspicions. You know, I really do. I mean, I hate saying that. I don't want to say that, but I still do have my suspicions that not every single game that we're watching is a true game of cricket.
Of course, you're at Lords when Mohammad Amir, the Pakistan fast bowler, was part of a spot fix when he bowled deliberate no balls, and I guess you know that memory must remain sort of quite chastening, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something that the game, you know, dealt with. But I've always thought that the best precedent for the game would be to ban players for life if they were caught fixing the game. I just think it's a message that would be sent. I think, you know, you're looking at what we hope is going to be a game that we can trust. You know, I still think the majority of the games that we do watch, you can trust, but I do think that shockwave around the game would be the best message that, you know, if you fix the game and you get caught doing so, you're not going to play the game again.
One of the sneaky highlights of your career is bowling Sachin Tendulkar in a test match, and with your rather fruity off-spin, and you know, you ran around, you celebrated, and the finger pointing, and a really big moment for you, wasn't it? And I guess it's just one of those ones that I guess becomes a bit more precious as the years pass.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd bowled the ball before and just lobbed it out wide, and he smacked me through extra cover, and we were trying to bowl him out for victory, and I thought, I'll just lob the next one a bit wide, a bit slower, and he missed it. And I always remember that at the end of the game, you know, the Indians drew the game, they batted well on the last day. My only thought process was that stump. So I've run up to the off stump and the red marks on the top of the off stump, nicked the stump, gone straight up to the umpire, said, got that ball, got the ball. Went into the dressing room, Duncan Fletcher, I remember him thinking, what's he doing? I've got the ball on the stump, and he's trying to give a debrief of the game, and I'm thinking I'm going down to that dressing room. After Duncan had said his 2 or 3 kind of minutes of talking, I just went, I snuck down to the Indian dressing room, I knocked on the door, and Sachin had been at Yorkshire, so I knew him. And I said, Sachin, can you sign these, please? So Sachin signed the ball, he signed the stump, and it's my prized possession. Forget me OBE. Not bothered about that. It's the stump and the ball of Sachin Tendulkar. It's framed in my house. It's the only bit of cricket memorabilia that I have in my house.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Forget any run. I don't care about runs, captaincy wins. It's about getting Sachin out.
You came into a dressing room with Hussain and Atherton, who'd been so badly beaten up by Australia, hadn't they, over the years? They couldn't beat Australia. Could you sense that scar tissue?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 reasons why the England side of the 90s couldn't beat Australia. Number 1 reason, the Aussies were too good. And I think the second reason, I never felt that they gave themselves enough chance mentally. You know, I do feel that, you know, because they had a group of players, there were some quality players, you know, but I think they had a group of players that were intimidated a little bit by the likes of Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath, Steve Waugh. Steve Waugh was a captain that, you know, I had the opportunity to play against in 2002-03, and he scared the life out of me.
In what way? Just
the way that he was. He just had this demeanour on the pitch that was hard. You know, you try and kind of catch eye contact just to say hello, and he wasn't interested. He never said much. You know, his tactics were always to make it uncomfortable. You know, as a batsman, and I always remember 2002-03, I was playing well, but he always made that last 2 hours before lunch or tea uncomfortable. He'd turn to Brett Lee, ball round the wicket at your head for those 2 hours, rather than the usual, you know, the part-time off he comes on. And I learnt so much. And I'm not just saying it because I'm here in Australia, but the majority of my career and the way that I played the game was through Australian sense. You know, Darren Lehman at Yorkshire, watching the Australians in the 90s, watching the likes of Steve Waugh captain, watching the likes of Ricky Ponting bat, seeing the likes of Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath just play the game in a tough manner, watching a group of 11 players being one, wanting to kind of contribute as an 11 group. And I think, you know, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, England had a team that had talent, but they couldn't kind of buy into that togetherness because I don't think they believed in themselves. And ultimately, you only believe in yourself when you start winning. And because England had lost so much, it was difficult for those senior pros. As you said, the baggage was there. And that's why we took a risk, you know, me as captain, Duncan Fletcher as the coach, going into 2005, that from when I got the captain in 2003, we had a process of making sure that by the time we reached 2005, you know, we cleared out a lot of the old stages. And it was only because we felt that we needed a fresh mindset. We needed a fresh set of eyes and a fresh set of players. And we were willing to take that gamble with a few younger players.
Michael Vaughan, the captain, needs to get some runs. It's the Vaughan of old. Well, it gets better and better for Michael Vaughan. Oh, that's creamed away through the offside. Michael Vaughan's enjoying this. That'll do. Through mid-wicket. And boy, what a return to form that is for the England captain.
The call to take the captaincy came pretty much out of the blue, didn't it, with Nasser Hussain standing down. Where were you when you got the call?
Oh, that was the last morning at Edgbaston, the first test against South Africa. We were going to have to fight out for the draw on the last day. We did get the draw in the end, but it was the Monday. You know, I walked into the dressing room probably around 8 o'clock, got there early, and Nasser was in the corner. He was clearly a little bit upset, and he just called me outside and just said, "Right, you're going to be the test captain." You know, none of the days now where you go and have to have an interview and there's a process of the selectors getting together. He'd obviously had a chat with the chairman at the time, David Graveney, and decided that I was going to be the test captain. And I always remember it was about 8:30. I looked at my kind of watch and thought, "Crikey, I'm going to be the test captain in about 3 days' time. We're playing at Lord's, so I better ring my dad." So I went and outside on my mobile, rang my dad and said, "Oh, Dad, you never guess what?" I said, I'm the test captain. And my dad just responded, went, "Jesus, they must be struggling." So 3 days later, yeah, I walked out at Lord's as a captain. But I always remember that evening, the evening of that Monday in Birmingham, because I went out for dinner with Duncan Fletcher. And Duncan says, "Right, what are you going to do?" I said, "We have to get a younger set of players in. You know, I love all these senior players that I've played with, but now it's about beating Australia. And now it's about trying to change a mindset that has been beaten for so long and try and get some fresher faces in and allow the Trescothics, the Flintoffs, the Harmisons to come through. And let's try and take Australia on in 2005 with a younger, fresher set of minds." And fortunately, the coach looked at me and said, "I've been wanting to hear that for a long period of time." We had to take a gamble. We had to take a risk in trying to approach those Australians in 2005 with something different that they'd not seen before.
Speaking of that, Matthew Hayden said when he landed in England and they played the first one day, Simon Jones threw a ball in his direction and it hit him. And he said guys came from everywhere. He said there was this hostility he'd never before felt from an English team. Was that pre-designed? Was that a mindset thing?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before that the Australian team were a juggernaut, and they knew they were. You know, and they knew they had so much power and they had so much skill, they had so much experience. And I think they felt that they could walk over every team, and understandably because they were so good. And my experience of 2002-03, because I'd played quite nicely against them, was that if you were willing to take a risk, if you were willing to stare them in the eye and go, "Okay, you're only human. You know, you can only bowl one ball at a time. You know, you can make mistakes. You know, and if you've got a positive mindset and a mindset that you're willing to have a go, you just never know." And that was all we tried to do as a team. We said, look, if it gets confrontational, it can't be just one of us that goes back. Everyone has to go back. Big thing for me was 2004. You know, we'd built up a team that was just starting to play some positive cricket. You know, cricket that was, you know, for the fans, good to watch. It was risky, but it was good to watch. We'd played a summer of 2004, won every single Test match. And then the Champions Trophy arrived. And I always remember at the start of the Champions Trophy, I just said, look, we want to play the Aussies. You know, it's our first time as a younger team that we want to play them. And we managed to play them in the semi-final. And we beat them at Edgbaston. And it was a big, big moment for the team because there was confrontation in that game and the team kind of looked back at Australia and went, "We'll take you on." And I thought that was a real big moment before 05, that the younger set of players, and the likes of Andrew Strauss were in there, Trescothick, myself, Flintoff, Harmison, Ashley Giles, you know, players that had, you know, not a great deal of experience against Australia. That was their first look at them. And to go out and beat them, even though it was one-day cricket, it was a real big key mental kind of moment for our team to know that if we go toe-to-toe, play aggressively, you just never know. You can take anyone on if you're willing to take that kind of mindset out into the middle, and that was a big moment for the team.
And then, of course, at Lord's that first morning when Justin Langer was hit on the elbow and Ricky Ponting had his cheek cut open by Harmison, it was just on, wasn't it? Like, it was as if they were revved up your attack to know that this was their moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and I look back and we were probably a little bit too revved up. You know, we were, you know, at times bowling 100 miles an hour. Our minds were working at 100 miles an hour. The movement in the field was at 100 miles an hour. And we probably could have breathed a little bit. But, you know, I always feel with Lords that, you know, we got hammered. You know, if you actually look at the score at the end of the game, we got beaten badly. But there was one real big key for me that generally in the last, you know, if you go back to 1989, you know, the Ashes series, the Australians in the first test generally come out and 3 or 4 of them big hundreds. You know, England generally get battered in the first game. We did, but there wasn't 100 by an Australian individual. You know, we got 20 wickets. So in the back of my mind, I thought, wait a minute, we've got 20 wickets. But I was so disappointed with the batsmen because leading into that series, all the talk was, and the only psychologies that we used was, you know, make sure that you're just facing the ball, not the name. Never ever face Shane Warne. You can't because he's too good. He'll blow you away with his mentality. Just face the leg spinner. And don't face Glenn McGrath, just face 84 miles an hour seam bowling. And that was all our psychology. And on that first test match at Lord's, we did face Glenn McGrath, we did face Shane Warne. You could see it in the players. I saw it in the dressing room, that we all froze a little bit. And we all got a little bit starstruck in that first game.
And then you got to Edgbaston. Of course, you're milling around before the game. Glenn McGrath goes over and Ricky Ponting wins the toss and elects to bowl. Now, what did you see that morning?
Well, I saw a decent pitch.
Would you have batted?
Absolutely. It was the only way you could beat that team. And there's no way that, you know, trying to take on Shane Warne, bowling last, was ever going to work. 2 big moments. I mean, you look at that series in 2005 and there's so many kind of facets to it that you look at. Yep. And I look at it as a captaincy perspective, and people say, oh, you know, you did such a good job managing the players and the tactical nous that you brought to the field, but you need luck. You know, and Glenn McGrath getting stretched off, that's a huge element of luck.
Can you remember the moment? Like,
yeah.
Did you sort of turn around and say, what's that?
Oh, I've never seen an England side in a team huddle giving so many low fives. I've never seen a happier Trescothick.
Really?
It was almost as if Trescothick had 25 Big Macs delivered on his doorstep. He just felt a huge sigh of relief that McGrath was going off. And, you know, people say, oh, you want to play against him. Of course you do, but, you know, when you're 1-0 down and you know you've got to win the second test and Glenn McGrath's being stretched off and then you go out to toss up and all the players in the dressing room going, Skip, you're going to have to win this one. We've got to bat first. And then Ricky wins it and said, oh, we'll have a ball fit. I've never grabbed a captain's hand as quick in all my time.
Really?
And then we went out and played in such an aggressive fashion. I mean, yeah, I said to the players, you've got to be really aggressive, particularly against Vaughan. You know, try and take him on. But I didn't think we were going to score 480 overs on day one.
It was extraordinary, wasn't it?
Yeah, I always remember, actually, it rained, so the Aussies couldn't have their 7 or 8 overs batting. And I remember being in the car park afterwards, and I'm happy, 400 on the deck, you know, we're in the test match. And I remember trying to get in my car, and Geoffrey Boycott walks by, and he just looks at me and goes, entertaining stuff that, skipper, but you won't win test matches batting like that. Really? I always remember, yeah. And on the Sunday morning when the Aussies were getting close, you know, it's getting to 40 and getting to 30, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we're going to lose this game. All I could think about was Boyks' comment, I think, please win this game, so I could at least go up to Boyks and say, well, you can win cricket matches batting like that.
Let's go back to that last day as the countdown was on. Brett Lee and Michael Kaspervitz, at the end, it was getting down, 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 a couple of runs away. And they still talk about it when you had a sweeper on the fence, the cover fence, and Lee swatted it through, and it was just anywhere beyond 10 metres either side. It was the game over, Australia 2-0 up. Extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
What were you thinking in those last few overs?
Oh, you're thinking you've lost.
Really?
Yeah, you're thinking you lost because just the whole momentum had shifted and Freddie Flintoff had bowled incredible. And Brett Lee had been hit, you know, all over his chest, on his hand. You know, the odd ball was flying down the leg side, it was hitting the footholes and then bouncing over the keeper's head. I'm thinking, it's just not meant to be. And then Simon Jones had dropped the catch down at third man. And my philosophy was that with the sweepers out, particularly to Brett Lee, was I just needed as many balls as possibly could. You know, just needed And if it was an extra 3 or 4 balls by having sweepers out, it was worth it because we only needed one delivery or one mistake. You know, that's the fine margins. You know, 2 metres either side, and we lose the Test match, it's 2-0. And I will say, if Australia go 2-0 up at that stage, it possibly would have been a whitewash. Really? You know, the team wouldn't have come back from 2-0 down. You know, the only reason that we gathered momentum is that we won a game, and we won that second Test match, and you could just see the relief in the dressing room, but you could also see not only relief, but a huge amount of confidence. You know, you look at the performance of Andrew Flintoff in that game, you look at the performance of Andrew Flintoff at Lord's, you know, and he will be the first to admit that he didn't play well, and he's spoken a lot about it since, saying he froze a little bit in that first game. So that second Test match was so important that our talisman, our star player, suddenly arrived, a couple of 50s, and he bowled that over against Justin Langer in the second innings, and then he got Ricky Ponting, and I think Ricky's described it as the greatest 4 balls that he'd ever faced. And you know, it was so important for us as a team that he found confidence, and it was that game at Edgbaston that he did so. And
of course, you went to Old Trafford, where Australia escaped with a draw, 9 wickets down. It was just so close, you could almost smell it, couldn't you? And what was your reaction to that?
Well, that was our best performance. We played great at Old Trafford. But the big thing for me was seeing Australia celebrate a draw. Yeah,
on the balcony?
Yeah, I'd never seen that. And that's...
And you said that to your team, is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I think sometimes it's very instinctive. I didn't plan that. I never planned anything really in leadership. When I was out there in the middle, I just kind of went with the flow and tried to react. Looking on that balcony and seeing them all celebrate a draw, you know, I just felt it was worth... The team didn't listen. You know, you got the group and they didn't listen, but I just felt it was worth saying to them, look, just have a look. I never thought I'd see Australia celebrate a draw. We play again like this, you know, we'll win this series.
Then, of course, it was just epic, wasn't it? The Oval, the last day, no one knew who was going to win the Ashes, even at lunch, you know, where the Ashes going. And so I can only imagine what your thoughts were.
Well, I remember the worst thing about that last day is arriving, and we were 1 wicket down, and I'm not out, so I'm a bit nervous about going out to bat. And then all the papers, you know, the ECB had announced that there's going to be a bus ride around London the next day. Not even won the Ashes yet. So you imagine the Aussies, they're looking at the paper, seeing all these headlines, the biggest motivation that you could give a great side. And, you know, that was a great day because it just ebbed and flowed. And, you know, we panicked a bit in the morning. McGrath bowled great. Warney just produced magic throughout the whole series. He got 40 wickets. How you end up on a losing side having got 40 wickets, I'll never know. And then Kevin Peterson, that spell of bowling before lunch by Brett Lee, where he got peppered. You know, and he could have been and should have been probably at any ball. And it's the first time in Kevin's career that I've actually seen fear. You know, I never thought... No, in the dressing room, I always remember at lunch and he was fearful because he wasn't scared of getting hurt, but I think he was fearful of the way to play. Yeah. And he always remember he said, "Skip, can I have a word?" And I was like, "Well, this could be dangerous." Don't know what he wants. And he said, "How do I play it?" I says, "Mate, just attack. Just go out and attack." I said, "We haven't played 4 Test matches, nearly towards the end of the 5th, and you know, we've been aggressive all series. There's no way we're stopping now. Just go out and have half an hour of fun and see where it takes. If we get half an hour of fun from you, I think the Ashes will be ours. So go and take them on." I think that first over after lunch, he played about 6 hook shots. The ball was flying everywhere. I was like, "Oh, steady on, steady on. Try and play a few with a straight bat, will you?" But that was great for our cricket. It was great. It was great for Test cricket. You know, it really was to see a series like that.
What about the celebrations? Like they seem to go on forever. The open top bus and when you think of them, what's some of your memories of the celebration?
I mean, it was great. It was over the top.
Yeah,
you know, I'll be the first to admit that. But you're not going to refuse a. You know, we didn't know it was going to be as big as that. You know, we were a bit nervous actually when we said, "Oh, there's going to be a bus ride around London. You're going to go to Trafalgar Square." I remember sitting in the dressing room afterwards actually, and we did have a few psychological like little slogans on the wall. It was, you play the ball, not the name. And I always remember sitting with Freddie when we were having a bud, and all the Aussies came in, and one by one, you had McGrath strolled in, Brett Lee, Sean Tate came in, then Damien Martin strolled in, Langer, Hayden, Ricky Ponting, the captain, strolled in. I remember looking at these slogans, and then the great Shane Warne walks through the door. As Warney walks through the door, Freddie Flintoff just swigs his beard, just looks at me and goes, "Effing hell, Skip, they're a bloody good team, aren't they?"
So the aura was back.
Oh, yeah. Well, we kind of conned the players into believing that you can beat them. It was a bit of a conning act, but, that day, the day after was you know, it was bizarre. We didn't understand, because you kind of keep yourself in a bubble when you're in a series like that. You have to, because if you read everything and you listen to everything, you're going to get lost. You know, to get on that bus and see thousands and thousands, I mean, it was, I think, and clearly they were celebrating the England team winning, but I think it was a celebration that two teams had just gone head to toe.
Yep.
We'd won 4 tosses, that was massive, winning the toss, batting first. And it proved to me, actually, how great a team that Australian side were, because we couldn't have played any better. We played beyond our expectations, yet we only beat them 2-1.
Well, Michael, I think your career has enriched the game in so many ways as a player and as a personality, and we've loved having you on Cricket Legends. Well played.
Cheers, Crash. Cheers, mate.